Hi good people, Titus here, and today we're going to be working on part 8 of our Frogger mini-series. In the previous video, we created a Cadillac vehicle, and in this video, we're going to create a sedan. Let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, so first we'll open up our content drawer. We'll go to our art folder, and we're just going to right click, create a new folder, and let's just call this sedan. We'll open that up. And we're going to basically be importing our static mesh. This one's a little bit simpler than the Cadillac because it's not going to have any custom textures. They're all going to be part of the static mesh. So we can just drag that in. It'll bring up the import wizard. The only thing I'd make sure is you can select static mesh, and if you scroll to the bottom and find build, just make sure build nanite is unchecked or disabled. Nanite's typically for photorealistic or high poly models. So it doesn't work really well on low or mid poly. It'll basically collapse the geometry in such a way where the model won't look correct. But once we hit import, you'll see we have 3 static meshes. We have the front and rear tires, and then the body, and then a bunch of materials, which this is perfect. Now we're gonna go to our blueprints folder, and we're gonna right click on our BP moving objects, and we're gonna create a child blueprint class. And we're going to basically follow the same step we did with the Cadillac. We'll just call it BP underscore sedan. Now if we double click, that'll open up here. And what we can do is open up our content drawer, select our sedan folder, and then we're going to select all the static meshes. Then we can hit the add menu in the components tree. And you'll notice there's an option for static mesh, and it'll have a reference to the multiple assets you have highlighted from your content drawer. We can select that, and it'll basically just build out the object for us, which is perfect. There is one issue with it though. We're going to be animating this object, and we're going to be like rotating the tires. If I select the tires and I try to rotate along the y-axis, you'll notice the pivot point is not centered to the static mesh. It's centered to the actual object, which is not what we want. So we can fix that real quick. We'll just come to an empty part of our level, and what we have to do is we have to drag out our objects. So that's our front tires. We'll drag out our rear tires, and then we have to change from selection mode to modeling mode. And then in the left-hand panel, select the X form, and then you'll notice there's an edit pivot. Just make sure one of your tires is selected, and then hit edit pivot. And then you just want to hit this little center button and pay special attention to the gizmo. You'll notice it should snap center to the static mesh, which we can see there. Then we're going to basically just hit accept at the bottom, and we're going to repeat these steps for the other set of tires here. So we'll hit edit pivot, choose center, hit accept, and these are both now good. So we can go back from modeling mode to selection. We can shift select both the tires and delete them from our scene because we no longer need them. But if we go back to the sedan, we're going to notice there's an issue. The tires are no longer lined up. So what we can do is we're going to select the front tires, change from perspective to the right view. And then we're basically just going to move the front tires to the front of the vehicle. When you're lining it up, if you can't quite snap it in place, you may have to change your grid snapping to a lower value, like I'm going to try 1, and then you might get a little more fine precision there, which it looks like I'm going to bring this down, maybe right about there, I think is good. Then I'm going to select the rear tires, move that back over here, and I'm just going to line it up with this little grid line where it's basically right on top, so maybe bump it up, maybe 1 more. No, that's probably too far, so I'll move back right there. This one seems like it might be a little high, but looks like that might be right. So we'll go right about there. We'll go back out of the into the perspective mode here. So we can see our front tires look good and the rear tires are fine. So now we have the beginnings of our sedan vehicle. We're going to choose the root component object. And in the details panel, you'll see we have the preview mesh. I'm going to set that to be the body of the sedan. I'll compile that. I'm also going to change the behavior type to be a loop reset, and I'm going to have a default duration of 10 seconds. And I'm going to compile and save that. That'll make it a little bit easier when we're dragging into the scene, where we won't have to make changes to each of those settings. Basically, it'll kind of carry over. But so far, this is pretty good. Let's actually drag it into the scene and see what it looks like. So we can go to our blueprints folder, drag it out here, and I'm just going to bump this up so it's off the ground a bit. Maybe right about there. And then you'll notice I can choose loop reset and have some control points here. Let's go ahead and just do 2 control points. We'll expand out the second one, and then we can grab the little diamond and move it forward. And now we can see it's actually moving over to the distance over 10 seconds, and then it should loop reset to go back to the original spot. Which looks great. Let's actually get a different level so we can see this a little bit easier because it's a little bit cramped. So let's do new level. We'll do basic. Hit save selected. All right, and then what we can do is let's drag out our sedan. We'll rotate it 90 degrees. And then we'll translate it up so it's touching the floor. So maybe right about there. Push it back, and I'm gonna add 2 elements. Second element, I'll just bump forward like that. And then we can simply just select the vehicle, hold the Alt key. And then we got a few different ones here that we can maybe rotate. All right, and we'll do -90 here and just move that back like so. Now let's change the times. Let's maybe do 8 seconds there, and let's do maybe 5 seconds there. Now we have different speeds, and that's working pretty good. We will have an issue. You can see it looks like collision is enabled on the vehicle, so we'll want to fix that. We can go back into the sedan and just select the car body, search for collision, and we're going to set it from block to overlap all, and we'll want to repeat that for the tires as well. Because remember, we're basically driving the logic to use overlap events rather than hit events. But if you are doing a project where you want physics involved, you will likely want to do a hit event and leave collision to block all, and then maybe just set the player object to go like ragdoll, so it gets launched across the map. That might be fun. So now when we get run over by the car, you see it triggers the death state. You die in the upper left hand corner, but it's just overlapping the actual player object, so this is perfect. One other adjustment we'll need to make is in the box trigger, which handles that logic. You can see it's a little bit small. It should encompass the entire body of the object. So we want to adjust our box extent. I found that 240, 110, and 130 work pretty okay for this object. We just need to shimmy it up a bit and then move it forward a smidge, right about there. So basically when this box overlaps the player, it'll trigger the death state, and that'll work just fine for our needs. So we'll compile and save that, and then when we go and play it, now the death event will trigger right when you hit the player rather than when the frog gets to the middle of the object. So that looks good. The last thing we'll want to do is let's actually animate the vehicle like we did with the Cadillac. So we're going to do that in a very similar fashion as well. We'll go to the event graph, and on the begin play, we'll simply create a timeline. And then what this timeline is going to do is it's going to animate the front and rear tires, so we can select those in the components tree, drag them out, pull off one of the pins and do a set relative rotation. You want to hook up both pins to the target field because we can basically target them at the same time, which is helpful. And the update pin from the timeline will feed into the update relative rotation. We'll want to also split the rotation because we're going to individually update only one of the axes here. If we look at the tires and I go into rotation mode, it looks like the Y axis, which we can see this little gizmo, green is the Y. If I drag that, that actually rotates the tire in the direction that I want to do. So that'll be what we actually target in the event graph. We're going to target the pitch. All right, so let's set up our timeline. We're going to double click and we're going to create a single float track starting off called tire rotation. Let's just be simple 2 keyframes. So right click, add a keyframe at 0, 0. And then right click again, add a second keyframe at the end of the timeline, which I'm doing 5 seconds. And then we'll do one full rotation is 360 degrees. So I'm going to do 359 degrees. The reason I'm doing that is because when you complete one full rotation, 360 is the same as 0 when it comes to rotation. They end at the same point. So because we are going to enable looping on this timeline, you don't want to make it 360, otherwise you're going to have one little frame or 1 second where the tires stay in place or they don't rotate, so it'll look a little weird. So your timeline should look like this. So if we compile, save, we now have tire rotation showing on the timeline, so I can just pass that into the pitch. And if I go to the viewport and actually simulate that, we can see if we are rotating here, which looks like we are not. So let me make sure I compile first. There we go. Now the rotation's a little bit slow, so we may want to control that with a variable. So I can hit click simulation to end it, and then under variables, we can create one called tire speed maybe. This should also be a float. And I'm going to publicly expose it, and let's try a default value of maybe 4. Now if we go back to the event graph, we'll want to change up the code just a little bit. So what we can do is we can come into a multiply node, and then we're just multiplying this value across our tire speed, like so. And then if we compile, go back to the viewport and hit simulate, you can see our tires rotate a little bit quickly, and we can also control that in editor because it is publicly exposed now. So if we stop the simulation, save it, go back, you can select any of these vehicles and you see there is a tire speed value. So you can adjust these on the fly if you need some tires to rotate slower than others because they're moving at different speeds. All right, but last but not least, I think a little bit of body wiggle will go well for this prototype. It'll fit the, I guess the art style at least. So what we can do is come back to our timeline at the top. We will add a second float track. We'll call this just wiggle. We're going to add the first keyframe at 0, 0. We want the end of the timeline to be at the same spot, so we will add a second keyframe at the time 5 with a value of 0. And then I'm going to add 2 keyframes kind of in the middle. So we'll add our third keyframe. We can do it 1.25, and we'll do a value of 2. And then our last keyframe, we can do maybe 3.75 at a value of -2. So then we can see we kind of have this sort of setup here. It's a little jagged. I would like it to be a smooth kind of transition. So you can right click on these little diamonds and you can set them to auto, which will adjust the interpolation to be a little bit smoother rather than linear, which is sharper. The transitions aren't as smooth or as nice. But once you have your timeline created, you'll notice we now have a wiggle pin that we can play with. So let's go ahead and just grab the body of the car, and we're gonna do the same thing, just set relative rotation, plug that in like here. We'll split the rotation so we have individual access to the pins. We just need to figure out what we need to rotate. So if we look at the car and I go into rotation mode, I think I want to rotate it kind of like this. And that's going to be the red, which is the x-axis, or the roll. So if we go back to the event graph, new rotation x roll, that's what we want to target right there. So I'll just plug the wiggle in like so. Double click to add a reroute node, compile, save, go back and we can simulate. And now we have this nice little roll that the car is doing as the tires are spinning. I think that looks pretty good. So let's real quick stop the simulation and go back over here. And then we can maybe have a little bit of fun and just add a few more vehicles. So we'll just shift select all these, hold the Alt key, drag them down, and then we can hit play. And now we have some vehicles moving around, rotating, and our project's starting to get there. But all right, everyone, I think we'll cut the video here. In the next one, we'll finish off the vehicles by creating the truck. As always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.